Black trainer's dogs refuse to board discover hidden stowaway pup. The rain hammered against the windows of the kennel office as Elijah Washington stood, shoulders squared, facing the kennel owner whose face had transformed from professional courtesy to unmistakable suspicion. Behind him, his three champion Dobermans animals that had performed flawlessly at competitions across the country were now refusing to enter their boarding kennels, hackles raised, growling at something unseen in the shadows. "Listen, I don't know what's going on with your dogs, but I can't have them disrupting my entire facility," the kennel owner, Martha Blackwell, said, arms crossed over her chest. "Maybe you should take them somewhere else." Elijah felt the familiar weight of judgment settling over him. He'd experienced it countless times before, the sideways glances, the sudden change in demeanor when he, a black man, walked into predominantly white spaces with his three imposing Dobermans. But this was different. His dogs, Apollo, Athena, and Atlas, were impeccably trained. They never behaved this way. "There's something wrong," Elijah insisted, his voice steady despite the frustration building inside him. "They sense something." What Elijah couldn't know was that his dog's instincts were about to unravel a mystery that would challenge everything he thought he knew about trust, prejudice, and the unexpected connections that can form between the most unlikely of allies. 3 days earlier, Elijah had been in his modest ranch-style home on the outskirts of Millfield, a small town where he'd lived all his life yet still sometimes felt like a stranger. At 52, he'd built a respectable reputation as a dog trainer, though many clients still did a double-take when they discovered the Washington they'd spoken to on the phone was a black man. The morning light filtered through the kitchen blinds as Elijah packed his bags. The National Doberman Training Championship in Denver was just 5 days away, and he'd secured a last-minute entry after another trainer had withdrawn. It was the opportunity he'd been working toward for years, a chance to finally gain the national recognition that might transcend the color of his skin. "You guys ready for the big time?" he asked, looking at his three Dobermans lounging in various spots around the kitchen. Their ears perked up at his voice, intelligent eyes tracking his movements. Apollo, the oldest at 6 years, gave a soft whine of acknowledgement. The phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the peaceful morning routine. Elijah checked the caller ID, Millfield Veterinary Clinic. "Mr. Washington," Dr. Reeves' voice came through the line, sounding apologetic. "I'm afraid I have some bad news. Our kennel assistant just quit without notice, and we're not going to be able to board your dogs while you're at your mother's birthday." Elijah's stomach dropped. "But I'm leaving tomorrow morning. The championship is right after my mother's birthday celebration. I can't possibly. I'm truly sorry, Mr. Washington. I've called every boarding facility in the area. The only one with space available is Highland Kennels out by the interstate." Elijah frowned. Highland Kennels had a decent reputation, but he'd heard stories from other minority pet owners about subtle discrimination. Still, he had no choice. His mother's 80th birthday celebration in Chicago couldn't be missed, and he needed to drop off the dogs before catching his flight to Denver for the championship. "I'll give them a call. Thank you, Dr. Reeves." After ending the call, Elijah sat heavily at his kitchen table. Atlas, his youngest Doberman, padded over and rested his head on Elijah's knee, sensing his distress. "It'll be fine, boy," Elijah said, scratching behind the dog's cropped ears. "We've dealt with worse." That evening, as Elijah finished packing, a soft, scratching sound came from his back porch. Apollo immediately stood at attention, moving toward the door with cautious curiosity rather than aggression. When Elijah opened the door, he found nothing but the gathering dusk and a light drizzle beginning to fall. "Must have been a squirrel," he muttered, closing the door. But as he turned away, a faint whimper caught his attention. He reopened the door and scanned the yard more carefully. There, huddled against the bottom step, was a small, bedraggled puppy, no more than 3 months old, soaking wet and shivering. "Where did you come from, little one?" Elijah asked, kneeling down. The puppy, a mixed breed with patches of black and white, cowered further into itself. Elijah noted with concern how thin the animal was, its ribs clearly visible beneath matted fur. Apollo approached cautiously, sniffing at the newcomer. To Elijah's surprise, his usually aloof Doberman gave the puppy a gentle nudge with his nose, almost protective. "Can't leave you out here in the rain, can I?" Elijah said, carefully picking up the trembling animal. "Let's get you dried off and fed, then we'll figure out what to do with you." Inside, Elijah toweled off the puppy and offered it some food, which it devoured ravenously. As he watched the small creature eat, he realized his predicament had just grown more complicated. He couldn't possibly take an untrained, possibly unvaccinated stray puppy to his mother's house, and he certainly couldn't bring it to the championship. Looks like I'll need to find a place for 4 dogs now, he sighed. After searching online for no-kill shelters and rescue organizations, Elijah was dismayed to find that none could take the puppy on such short notice. His only option was to bring all 4 dogs to Highland Kennels and hope they would accommodate the unexpected addition. The following morning dawned gray and overcast, matching Elijah's mood as he loaded his 3 Dobermans into his SUV. The puppy, whom he'd taken to calling Stowaway, sat in a small carrier on the passenger seat, still wary but no longer trembling in fear. "This is just temporary," Elijah told the animals as he drove. "5 days at Highland, then I'll pick you up on my way back from Denver." Highland Kennels was an impressive facility situated on several acres of land just off the interstate. Modern buildings with gleaming windows housed the kennels, and a large sign proclaimed their status as the premier pet boarding experience. As Elijah pulled into the parking lot, he noticed he was the only person there aside from staff, a small relief, as he'd grown accustomed to the stares his Dobermans attracted in public spaces. Martha Blackwell, the owner, greeted him at the reception desk with professional courtesy, though Elijah didn't miss the slight tightening around her eyes when she saw him, a reaction he'd grown all too familiar with over the years. "Mr. Washington, welcome to Highland Kennels. I understand you need boarding for 3 Dobermans. Actually, there's been a change of plans," Elijah explained. "I found this stray puppy last night." He gestured to the carrier. "I was hoping you might be able to accommodate it as well." "I've brought extra to cover the cost." Martha peered into the carrier, her expression softening slightly at the sight of the small puppy. "Poor little thing. We should be able to make room, though we'll need to keep it separate from other animals until a vet can check it over." "Of course," Elijah agreed. "I appreciate your flexibility." The paperwork was handled efficiently, and soon it was time to settle the dogs into their kennels. Elijah led Apollo, Athena, and Atlas on their leashes, following Martha through the facility with an assistant carrying Stowaway's carrier behind them. Everything went smoothly until they reached the kennel area. As they approached the designated spaces, Apollo suddenly stopped, his body going rigid. Athena and Atlas followed suit, all 3 Dobermans standing perfectly still, staring intently at something in the kennel area. "What's wrong with them?" Martha asked, a note of concern creeping into her voice. "I'm not sure," Elijah replied, equally puzzled. His dogs were impeccably trained, they never refused commands. "Apollo Kennel," he said firmly, pointing to the open door of the first space. Apollo didn't move. Instead, a low growl rumbled in his throat, not aggressive, but clearly communicating distress. "Is there something wrong with the kennels?" Elijah asked, looking around for anything that might be upsetting his dogs. Martha's expression changed, the professional courtesy giving way to suspicion. "The kennels are perfectly fine, Mr. Washington. We've never had a problem before." Elijah recognized the implication in her tone, the unspoken suggestion that the problem must be with his dogs or perhaps with him. He'd heard that tone countless times before, the subtle shift that signaled he was being viewed not as a respected dog trainer but as a problem to be managed. "My dogs are champion-trained," he said evenly. "They've never behaved this way before. Something is wrong." "Perhaps they're just nervous about being left," Martha suggested, though her expression suggested she didn't believe it. "Some dogs can sense when their owners are going away." "Not these dogs," Elijah insisted. "They board regularly when I travel for competitions. Something specific is bothering them." He tried again to guide Apollo into the kennel, but now all 3 Dobermans were growling softly, their attention fixed on the back corner of the kennel area. The assistant holding Stowaway's carrier shifted uncomfortably. "Listen, I don't know what's going on with your dogs, but I can't have them disrupting my entire facility," Martha said, arms crossed over her chest. "Maybe you should take them somewhere else." Elijah felt the familiar weight of judgment settling over him. But before he could respond, a strange sound came from the back of the kennel area, a faint whimpering, barely audible over the rain pounding on the roof. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Martha frowned. "Hear what?" "That sound, like a dog in distress." "Mr. Washington, all of our boarders are well taken care of, I assure you." Another whimper, slightly louder this time. Martha fell silent, her head turning toward the sound. "That's coming from the supply closet," she said, moving toward a door at the back of the room. Elijah followed, his Dobermans suddenly alert but no longer resistant. As Martha opened the closet door, a shaft of light fell across the floor, illuminating a small, huddled form in the corner, a dog no more than a year old with a distinctive white blaze on its chest despite its predominantly black coat. "Shadow," Martha gasped. "What are you doing in here?" The dog, a border collie mix, looked up with frightened eyes. It was then that Elijah noticed the bandage around its leg and the missing patch of fur on its side. "This is one of our rescue cases," Martha explained, her voice softening as she knelt beside the trembling animal. "He was brought in last week after being hit by a car. Our vet treated him, but he's been recovering in the medical suite. I have no idea how he got in here." As if in answer, Stowaway began whining frantically in the carrier, struggling to get out. Elijah looked between the stray puppy and the injured rescue dog, a suspicion forming in his mind. "May I?" he asked, indicating the carrier. When Martha nodded, he opened it, allowing Stowaway to scramble out. The reaction was immediate and unmistakable. The injured dog's shadow lifted his head, his entire demeanor changing from fear to joy. Stowaway raced to the larger dog, whimpering with excitement, licking at Shadow's face while the older dog nuzzled the puppy gently. "They know each other," Elijah said softly. "I think they're from the same place." Martha watched the reunion with wide eyes. "But how did Shadow get out of the medical suite and into this closet? And how did this puppy end up at your house?" It was a good question, one that would lead to discoveries neither of them could have anticipated, about connections that transcended species, about prejudice and its consequences, and about the remarkable journey of two dogs that would change the lives of everyone involved. As the rain continued to pound against the windows, Elijah's Dobermans relaxed, their earlier tension forgotten as they watched the reunion of two lost souls. And in that moment something shifted between Elijah and Martha, a small crack in the wall of assumptions that had initially divided them. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had a visitor." "It's all right, Rachel," Martha said. "This is Mr. Washington. He'll be staying in cabin 3 tonight while we sort out a situation with some of our dogs." "Could you prepare it for him?" "Of course," Rachel replied, her gaze lingering curiously on Elijah before she left. "Rachel's our senior kennel manager," Martha explained. "She's been with us for 5 years, excellent with the animals." Elijah nodded, noticing the way Martha was now going out of her way to be cordial, another familiar pattern. "I appreciate your accommodation," he said, "but I'm still concerned about what's happening here. Those two dogs, there's more to their story." "We'll get answers from Kevin," Martha assured him. "In the meantime, let me show you to the cabin. You must be tired, and I'm sure you'd like to get settled before lunch." The cabin was small but comfortable, with a rustic charm that belied its modern amenities. A queen-sized bed dominated the main room, with a small kitchenette in one corner and a surprisingly spacious bathroom. Through the window, Elijah could see the kennel buildings, and beyond them, rolling hills obscured by rain and mist. After Martha left, promising to send someone with lunch later, Elijah sat on the edge of the bed, mentally reviewing everything that had happened. The puppy appearing at his doorstep in the rain. His dog's refusal to enter the kennels. The discovery of Shadow hidden in the closet. Kevin's suspicious behavior on the security footage. None of it made sense yet, but Elijah had a growing certainty that he was meant to be involved somehow. It was as if the dogs themselves had orchestrated events to bring him here to this place at this moment. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Rachel, the kennel manager, holding a tray with a sandwich, chips, and a steaming mug of coffee. "Thought you might be hungry," she said with a friendly smile. "Martha mentioned you've had quite a morning." "Thank you," Elijah said, taking the tray. "That's very kind." Rachel lingered in the doorway, seeming hesitant. "I heard about what happened with Shadow and the stray puppy. It's unusual." "You could say that," Elijah agreed. "Do you know Kevin well, Martha's nephew?" A shadow crossed Rachel's face. "Well enough. He's been working here about 6 months, keeps to himself mostly." She paused. "He's had some trouble in the past, nothing serious, just he cares about the animals sometimes too much." "What do you mean?" Rachel glanced over her shoulder as if checking that no one was listening. "Kevin doesn't always agree with Martha's policies. Last month, there was an older dog scheduled for euthanasia at the county shelter terminal cancer in pain. Martha declined to take it as a rescue case because our medical budget was already stretched thin. Kevin was upset about it. And Shadow, what's his story? Hit and run on County Road 8 about a week ago. Someone brought him in pretty badly injured. He's been recovering well, though." Rachel frowned. "I don't understand why Kevin would move him from the medical suite. It doesn't make sense." Elijah considered this information. "And you haven't noticed anything else unusual recently, with Kevin or any of the animals?" Rachel hesitated again. "Well, Kevin's been spending a lot of time with a litter of puppies that came in 2 weeks ago. The mother was found dead by the highway, looked like she'd been hit by a car too. 4 puppies survived. We've been bottle feeding them, getting them ready for adoption." "4 puppies?" Elijah asked, his interest piqued. "What breed?" "Mixed, probably some border collie given their markings, black and white like Shadow, in fact." Rachel trailed off, her eyes widening. "Oh, you don't think that Shadow might be related to them? It seems possible," Elijah said. "Could you show me these puppies after I eat?" "Of course," Rachel agreed readily. I'll come back in about 30 minutes. The puppy room is just behind the main kennel building. After she left, Elijah ate quickly, his mind working through the new information. A border collie mix hit by a car on County Road 8. 4 orphaned puppies with similar markings. Shadow hidden in a closet. And somehow one puppy finding its way specifically to his home miles away. True to her word, Rachel returned half an hour later, and Elijah followed her across the compound to a smaller building set slightly apart from the main facility. Inside, it was warm and bright, with several enclosed areas containing dogs of various ages. "The orphan puppies are in here," Rachel said, leading him to a pen in the corner. Inside, 3 black and white puppies tumbled over each other, playing with colorful toys. They looked to be about the same age as Stowaway, with similar markings. 3, Elijah noted. "You said there were 4? Rachel nodded, looking puzzled. "There were. I don't understand." She quickly counted again, then checked a clipboard hanging on the wall. "That's strange. The morning count shows 4 puppies. No one's reported one missing." Elijah knelt by the pen, studying the playing puppies. "When was the last time anyone specifically counted them?" "This morning at feeding time around 7. I did it myself." Rachel's forehead creased with concern. "I need to check the records, see if someone processed an adoption without updating the main system." Or, Elijah suggested quietly, one could have escaped, perhaps with help. Rachel's eyes widened as she caught his meaning. "Kevin, but why would he?" "That's what I intend to find out," Elijah said, standing up. "What time did you say he's due in today?" "Noon," Rachel replied. But she was interrupted by the sound of the door opening behind them. They turned to see Martha entering, her expression grave. "Rachel, could you give us a moment?" she asked. Once they were alone, Martha turned to Elijah. "Kevin just called in sick, says he has a stomach bug. Given what we saw on the security footage, I'm not inclined to believe him." "One of the puppies is missing from this litter," Elijah informed her. "Rachel says they were all accounted for at 7 this morning." Martha's face tightened. "Kevin's shift started at 6. He would have been here before Rachel arrived." She took a deep breath. "I think it's time we paid my nephew a visit. He lives in an apartment in town. Would you be willing to come with me? I have a feeling I'm going to need someone objective." The implication was clear. Martha was struggling to reconcile her role as Kevin's aunt with her responsibilities as a business owner. Elijah understood that kind of conflict all too well. "Of course," he agreed. "But first, I'd like to see Shadow and Stowaway again. I have a theory I want to check." Martha nodded, leading him back to the main building and into the medical suite. Shadow was resting comfortably on a padded bed, with Stowaway curled up against his side, both dogs looking up when the humans entered. Elijah approached slowly, speaking in soft, reassuring tones. Shadow's tail thumped weakly against the bedding, a good sign. The puppy Stowaway watched Elijah with clear recognition, no longer fearful as it had been the night before. "Rachel tells me a female dog was found dead near where Shadow was injured," Elijah said, gently examining the puppy. "Possibly the mother of the orphaned litter." "Yes," Martha confirmed. "The theory was that she was trying to cross the road with her puppies when she was hit. A good Samaritan found the puppies nearby and brought them in." Elijah nodded slowly. "And Shadow was found injured in the same area a few days later." "County Road 8, yes, about a mile from the entrance to Highland Hills subdivision." Elijah looked up. "That's my neighborhood." The realization hung in the air between them, a connection neither had noticed before. Elijah lived in Highland Hills, less than a mile from where both Shadow and the puppy's mother had been struck by vehicles. "So Shadow could be, what, the father of the puppies?" Martha speculated. "Or at least familiar to them," Elijah suggested. "Family or not, there's clearly a connection, and somehow Kevin figured it out." The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture that was both troubling and touching. A family of dogs separated by tragedy, a young man who cared enough to try to reunite them even if his methods were questionable. "We need to talk to Kevin," Martha said decisively. "My car's out front." Before leaving for town, Martha arranged for Rachel to care for Elijah's Dobermans and the 2 rescued dogs. The rain had finally stopped, though dark clouds still hung low over the landscape as they drove toward Millfield. "I should tell you," Martha said as they traveled, "Kevin's had a difficult few years. His parents, my brother and his wife, divorced when he was 14. Neither really wanted custody, so he bounced between homes until he was old enough to get his own place. He's always been better with animals than with people." Elijah nodded, understanding the context she was providing. "Many of us find that animals offer a simpler, more honest connection than humans sometimes do." Martha glanced at him briefly. "Yes, I suppose that's true." After a pause, she added, "I want to apologize again for my reaction earlier. When your dogs wouldn't enter the kennels, I assumed that they were poorly trained, or perhaps that I couldn't control them." Something like that, Martha admitted. It was unfair of me. It's a reaction I've grown accustomed to, Elijah said evenly. Being a black man with 3 Dobermans tends to trigger certain assumptions. Martha didn't respond immediately, her grip tightening slightly on the steering wheel. I'd like to think I don't make judgments based on race, she said finally. Most people would like to think that, Elijah replied without rancor. But we all carry biases, conscious or not. The important thing is recognizing them when they surface. The conversation lapsed into silence as Martha turned onto a side street lined with apartment buildings. She pulled into a visitor's parking space outside a 3-story complex that had seen better days. Kevin lives in 2C, she said as they got out of the car. I have a spare key for emergencies, but I'd rather not use it unless necessary. They climbed the exterior stairs to the 2nd floor and found apartment 2C at the end of an open-air corridor. Martha knocked firmly. No answer came, but Elijah thought he heard movement inside. Kevin, it's Aunt Martha, we need to talk. Still no response. Martha knocked again, louder this time. Kevin, I know you're in there, this is important. Finally, the door opened a crack, revealing a young man in his early 20s with disheveled brown hair and wary eyes. He looked between Martha and Elijah, confusion giving way to resignation. You know, don't you? He asked quietly. About Shadow, about the missing puppy? Yes, we know, Martha confirmed. May we come in? Kevin hesitated, then stepped back, opening the door wider. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, with mismatched furniture that suggested second-hand acquisitions. What stood out, however, were the dog supplies scattered everywhere: beds, toys, food bowls, and training books stacked on every surface. And there, in a carefully arranged pen in the corner of the living room, was a black and white puppy identical to Stowaway, playing with a rope toy. So I was right, Elijah said softly. You took one of the orphaned puppies. Kevin's shoulders slumped. I was going to tell you, Aunt Martha, I just needed to make sure it would work out first. Make what work out? Martha demanded. Kevin, you can't just take animals from the kennel. That's theft. I wasn't stealing them, Kevin protested. I was trying to save them, to keep them together. What do you mean, keep them together? Elijah asked, his voice gentler than Martha's. Kevin looked at him, seeming to really notice Elijah for the first time. Who are you? My name is Elijah Washington. The other missing puppy showed up at my house last night. Kevin's eyes widened. It did. Is it okay? She's fine, Elijah assured him. But I think you need to explain what's going on here. Deflating, Kevin sank onto the couch. Shadow isn't just some random stray, he began. He's been coming to the kennel for months, always hanging around the perimeter fence. I started feeding him, trying to gain his trust. I figured he was a farm dog from somewhere nearby who'd gotten loose. Why didn't you tell me about this? Martha interrupted. Because you would have called animal control, Kevin said defensively. And they would have taken him to the county shelter. You know what happens to unclaimed dogs there after 7 days. Martha pressed her lips together but didn't deny it. Anyway, Kevin continued, about 3 weeks ago, Shadow stopped coming around. I was worried about him. Then last week, he was brought in injured. I recognized him immediately. And when I checked his ID tag, Martha interjected. There was no ID tag when he was brought in. Kevin looked away guiltily. I removed it because of what it said. And what was that? Elijah asked. Kevin got up and went to a drawer in the kitchenette, retrieving a simple metal dog tag which he handed to Elijah. It read, Shadow on one side and on the other. IF found, returned to 1842 Highland HILLS doctor. Elijah stared at the tag, a chill running through him. That's my address, he said quietly, but I've never owned a dog named Shadow. I've only had my Dobermans for the past 8 years. I know, Kevin said. I looked you up after I saw the address. You're that dog trainer who works with the rescue organizations sometimes. But the thing is, that house 1842 Highland Hills Drive, it used to belong to old Mr. Jennings before you bought it. George Jennings, Elijah confirmed. He passed away about 9 years ago. The house was empty for nearly a year before I purchased it. Mr. Jennings had a border collie mix named Shadow, Kevin explained. My mom used to clean house for him when I was a kid. I'd play with Shadow while she worked. When Mr. Jennings died, his children took everything they wanted and just left Shadow behind. Animal control picked him up, but he escaped from their van. Everyone assumed he'd either died or been adopted by someone else. But he wasn't, Martha said, understanding dawning on her face. He's been living as a stray all these years? That's hard to believe. Border collies are incredibly intelligent and resourceful, Elijah noted, and they form strong attachments if Shadow was trying to get back to the only home he'd known. Exactly, Kevin confirmed. I think he's been trying to find his way back to Mr. Jennings' house, your house, all this time, and somewhere along the way he met a female dog, had puppies. Then the mother was killed, and Shadow was injured trying to protect the litter. The story was extraordinary, yet it made a strange kind of sense. Dogs were known to travel hundreds of miles to return to their homes. The fact that Shadow had managed to survive for years as a stray, eventually fathering a litter of puppies, spoke to his remarkable resilience. So when I moved Shadow to the supply closet, Kevin continued, I was planning to nurse him back to health, then secretly release all the puppies together so they could be a family. I took one puppy last night as a test to see if I could care for it properly. I was going to take the others today. And Stowaway? Elijah asked. The puppy that showed up at my door? Kevin shook his head. That wasn't me, I only took this one. He gestured to the puppy in the pen. The others were all still there when I left last night. So one of the puppies escaped on its own, Martha mused, and somehow found its way to Mr. Washington's house, the same address on Shadow's tag. Dogs have been known to inherit navigation abilities, Elijah said thoughtfully. And scent memory can be passed down genetically. It's possible that Shadow communicated something to his puppies about that location through behavior, if not directly. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, processing the implications of this remarkable story. A dog loyal beyond measure, spending years trying to return to a home where his owner no longer lived. Puppies inheriting that same drive, that same connection to a place they'd never been. And somehow, Elijah finding himself in the middle of it all, living in the house that Shadow still considered home, discovering one of Shadow's puppies on his doorstep, his own dogs sensing the connection when they arrived at Highland Kennels. If you've been following this journey so far, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Please hit the subscribe button and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. Now, let's continue with our tale. What happens now? Kevin asked, breaking the silence. He looked anxiously between Elijah and Martha. Are you going to report me? Martha sighed, the anger having drained from her expression. You should have come to me with this, Kevin. We could have figured something out together. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, Kevin admitted, or that you'd think I was being sentimental, letting my feelings cloud my judgment. There's a difference between sentimentality and compassion, Martha said. I may run a business, but I've never stopped caring about the animals in my charge. Elijah had been quiet, thinking. Now he spoke. I believe there's a solution here that might work for everyone, including Shadow and his puppies. Both Kevin and Martha turned to him expectantly. I have a large property with plenty of space for dogs, Elijah explained. My Dobermans are well socialized and have always gotten along with other animals. What if Shadow and his puppies came to live with me? At the home Shadow has been trying to return to all these years. The suggestion hung in the air, unexpected yet somehow perfect. Kevin's expression brightened immediately while Martha looked thoughtful. You'd take all of them, she asked. 4 puppies plus Shadow, that's a significant commitment, Mr. Washington. It is, Elijah acknowledged. But I've spent my life working with dogs. I have the skills and resources to care for them properly, and there's something about this situation that feels meant to be. As if I was supposed to be part of their story. Kevin looked to his aunt, hope clear in his eyes. It would keep them together like I wanted, and Shadow would finally be home. Martha considered for a long moment, then nodded slowly. It could work. The puppies haven't been officially put up for adoption yet, and Shadow was technically a stray with no clear owner. She turned to Elijah. But what about your trip, your mother's birthday and the championship in Denver? Elijah smiled. I'll still go to Chicago tomorrow for my mother's birthday. As for the championship, there will be others. Some things are more important. I could help, Kevin offered eagerly. While you're away, I could stay at your place, look after all the dogs. I've already arranged time off from my classes, and Aunt Martha was going to cover my shifts at the kennel anyway. Martha raised an eyebrow. That was when you were supposedly sick with a stomach bug. Now I know you were planning to steal puppies instead. Kevin had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm sorry about lying, I really am, but this could be a way to make it right. Elijah considered the offer. Having someone experienced with the puppies stay at his house while he was in Chicago would solve his immediate problem. And Kevin, despite his questionable methods, clearly cared deeply about the animals. If Martha agrees, I'd appreciate the help, Elijah said. Just for the 2 days I'll be away. We can discuss longer-term arrangements when I return. Martha sighed, but there was a hint of fondness in her exasperation. I suppose that would be acceptable, but Kevin, this doesn't excuse what you did. There will still be consequences at work. I understand, Kevin said solemnly, and I accept whatever punishment you think is fair. With the immediate crisis resolved, they began working out the logistics. Kevin would return the puppy he'd taken to Highland Kennels. where all 4 puppies and Shadow would be properly examined by a veterinarian before being released to Elijah's care. Kevin would then accompany Elijah to his home to help settle the dogs in before Elijah left for Chicago the following morning. As they prepared to leave Kevin's apartment, Elijah found himself reflecting on the strange series of events that had brought them all together. If his regular boarding arrangement hadn't fallen through, if Kevin hadn't recognized Shadow, if one determined puppy hadn't somehow found its way to Elijah's doorstep, none of this would have happened. "You know," Martha said as they drove back to Highland Kennels, Kevin following in his own truck, "I've been in this business for 20 years and I've never encountered anything quite like this." "Dogs are remarkable animals," Elijah replied. "Their capacity for loyalty, for connection, continues to surprise even those of us who work with them every day." Martha nodded, then added hesitantly, "I want you to know that I'm truly sorry about my initial reaction to you and your dogs. I made assumptions that were unfair and probably rooted in biases I need to examine more honestly." The apology was straightforward this time, without qualification or defensiveness. Elijah appreciated that. "Thank you," he said simply. "That means a lot." Back at Highland Kennels, the process of preparing Shadow and the puppies for their new home began. The veterinarian confirmed that Shadow's injuries were healing well, and all 4 puppies, now reunited, were healthy and developing normally. Elijah's Dobermans, brought in to meet the new additions under controlled conditions, displayed remarkable gentleness with the puppies and a respectful curiosity toward Shadow. By late afternoon, preparations were complete. Elijah, Kevin, Shadow, the 4 puppies, and the 3 Dobermans all loaded into Elijah's SUV and Martha's truck for the journey to Highland Hills. As they drove away from the kennel, Martha stood watching, a thoughtful expression on her face, the beginning, perhaps, of a reassessment of her own preconceptions. Elijah's home, a spacious ranch-style house on 2 acres of land, provided plenty of room for the expanded canine family. The backyard was already set up for dogs, with secure fencing, shaded areas, and even a small splash pool for hot days. Inside, Elijah had prepared a special area in the mudroom for Shadow and his puppies, with comfortable bedding and easy access to the yard. When Shadow was carried into the house, his injuries still limiting his mobility, the older dog's reaction was immediate and profound. His ears perked up, his nose worked frantically, and a soft whine escaped him as he took in the familiar sense of what had once been his home. Though nearly a decade had passed and the house had changed considerably under Elijah's ownership, something essential remained that Shadow recognized. "Welcome home, old boy," Elijah said softly, setting Shadow gently on a plush dog bed. "It's been a long journey, hasn't it?" The puppies, less burdened by history, explored their new surroundings with typical puppy enthusiasm, supervised carefully by the Dobermans, who seemed to have appointed themselves guardians of the smaller dogs. Kevin watched it all with undisguised delight, snapping photos on his phone to show his aunt later. That evening, as Elijah prepared for his delayed trip to Chicago, he sat on the back porch watching the unusual collection of dogs in his yard. Apollo, his oldest Doberman, had positioned himself protectively near Shadow, while Athena and Atlas monitored the puppy's play with attentive patience. The scene was one of harmony, different breeds, different backgrounds, coming together as an unlikely family. Kevin joined him, bringing out 2 mugs of coffee. "It's amazing how well they're all getting along," he observed, handing Elijah one of the mugs. "Dogs are often better than humans at accepting differences," Elijah replied. "They judge based on behavior, not appearance or preconceptions." Kevin nodded thoughtfully. "I wish people were more like that." "Some are learning," Elijah said. "Your aunt, for instance, it took courage for her to acknowledge her initial judgment of me." "She's a good person," Kevin said loyally, "just set in her ways sometimes." "Most of us are," Elijah acknowledged. "Change is difficult, especially changing how we see the world." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard. One of the puppies, Stowaway, the adventurous one who had found her way to Elijah's door, broke away from her siblings to climb awkwardly onto Shadow's bed, curling up against her father's side. Shadow gently nuzzled the puppy, a picture of contentment. "You know," Kevin said, "I've been thinking about names for the puppies. Stowaway obviously has hers already, but the others need names too." "What did you have in mind?" Elijah asked. "Well, considering their journey, how about Voyager, Quest, and Odyssey, names that honor how far they've come to be together?" Elijah smiled. "I like that, names with meaning." As darkness fell and the dogs were settled in for the night, Elijah finished packing for his trip to Chicago. He would leave early the next morning, confident that Kevin would take good care of the expanded pack during his brief absence. When he returned, they would begin the process of officially integrating Shadow and his puppies into their new home, a home that was, in some ways, Shadow's all along. The championship in Denver would have to wait for another year. Elijah found he didn't mind. Some opportunities were worth missing for the right reasons, and helping to reunite this remarkable canine family felt more significant than any trophy or recognition. In the quiet of the night, with all the dogs sleeping peacefully throughout the house, Elijah reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them all together. A loyal dog's unwavering desire to return home, a puppy's remarkable journey to find help, his own Doberman's insistence that something was wrong at the kennel, and yes, even Martha's initial suspicion and subsequent change of heart. Each piece had been necessary to create this unexpected outcome. This new family forged across barriers of breed, experience, and circumstance. Much like the human connections that had formed alongside them, Elijah and Kevin, Martha and Elijah, all brought together by the dog's remarkable story. As he drifted off to sleep, Elijah wondered what George Jennings, Shadow's original owner, would think if he could see his faithful companion now. Finally back in the home he'd never stopped trying to return to, surrounded by his own puppies and a new extended family of both dogs and humans. Perhaps, Elijah thought, there was a lesson in Shadow's unwavering loyalty and persistence, a reminder that some bonds transcend time, distance, and even death. That home isn't always about a place, but about connections that endure against all odds. The following morning dawned clear and bright, the rain of the previous days having washed everything clean. Elijah said his goodbyes to the dogs, including special attention for Shadow and his puppies, and left Kevin with detailed instructions for their care. As he drove away toward the airport, he glanced in his rearview mirror at his house, and now Shadow's once again standing peaceful in the morning light. He'd be back soon to continue this unexpected new chapter in his life. And when he returned from Chicago, he would begin making plans for the next national championship, where he would compete not just with his Dobermans, but with a remarkable border collie mix named Shadow, who had demonstrated more heart and determination than most humans Elijah had known. Some dogs, like some people, came into your life unexpectedly, changing everything in ways you could never have anticipated. The trick was recognizing these moments for the gifts they were, and having the courage to embrace the new path they revealed. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected connections and second chances, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what this story meant to you and what other stories you'd like us to share in the future. Thank you for joining us on this journey.